Hey everyone, my name is Rosander, and I'm a senior program associate at the Shared Use Mobility Center. I want to thank you all for joining this conversation. Today we are talking with Zach Agush, a principal planner from the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, who was awarded an Accelerating Innovative Mobility Grant from the Federal Transit Administration to support a ride-free Central Falls demonstration project. So thank you so much for joining us, Zach. Would you like to introduce yourself, your agency, and kind of the services you typically provide?
Sure. First off, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about the project we've been running for the better part of the last year. As Alex said, I'm Zachary Agush, planner here at Rhode Island Public Transit. Been here for a little over 4.5 years now. And, for RIPTA, at a service level, we're a rather unique case nationally. We're one of the very few statewide transit operators. So we have a statewide mandate to provide service to all the communities within Rhode Island, which total 39. We are responsible for state paratransit service within all the ADA corridors. And we operate a number of kind of zone-based flexible services in parts of the state where running a proper fixed route may be a little bit more challenging based on whether it's the geography or the land use or any number of things. And so we've been in existence since 1966, and we're in the process of now implementing our rather grand Transit Forward Rhode Island 2040 master plan that kind of outlines the service improvements and capital investments that we wish to implement over the next 20 years.
Awesome. Well, I was curious if you could describe a bit more about the Ride-Free Central Falls project and actually how that fits into maybe the agency's longer term goals and this master plan you just mentioned.
Sure. So I think the first thing I would want to point out is, while the title of the program is Ride-Free Central Falls, it's very important to stress that the main emphasis is really to not for us was to develop, deploy, and essentially monitor a geofencing functionality within the WAVE application. I know we're going to talk about that in a moment, where our intention and how it kind of fits with Transit Forward is that it gives us, if this functionality is successful, it would allow us to use it as a leverage to work with private businesses, to work with private employers, public agencies, private events. The spectrum is wide and varied. That would allow us to say, what, if you have an event and you want people to not drive to that location, we could set up geofences in particular locations to say, well, if you took the bus to this location, instead of us charging you the $2, we could charge you a discounted rate. Maybe that's an arrangement we build with the particular sponsor. So like an example that would come to mind, and I would love it to happen if it could, is Providence has over the years had a long weekend of an arts festival, if you will, and it brings tens of thousands of people to downtown Providence for a 3 to 4 day period. And being that downtown Providence is the heart of RIPTA's network, we could, in theory, say, what, anyone who's boarding in and around downtown Providence, we could offer that as a free incentive to get people to actually participate in that event. Or another opportunity that could be is there's a large neighborhood gathering. Maybe it's a chamber of commerce or a local business organization saying, what, we have a one-day promotional event where we want people to come to our local businesses. That could be an opportunity for us to partner with them in using this functionality to help inspire people to actually not drive to those locations. So the technology itself is the ground basis. And so where the ride-free portion comes in, particularly for Central Falls, is that we wanted to test this functionality primarily at a city level and say, could we work with a municipality to use it as a driving force to say, well, could we incentivize people to actually use public transit more than they're using it now, while still testing this functionality of whether we can partner with municipalities, if we could partner with organizations or what have you. So Central Falls is a good case study in general. I know we'll talk about why in a moment, but I really do want to emphasize this was a technology first project, first and foremost.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think I'm stuttering, so I'm gonna have to edit this. But so as you mentioned, the pilot is conducted as a part of this kind of broader initiative. All of RIPTA is transitioning to this smart payment system, which is the technology you were referring to called WAVE. Could you provide an overview of that WAVE technology for us and why RIPTA chose to make that transition, and then how that transition is informing or complementing this pilot, which you kind of touched on? But
sure. So at a very high level, WAVE is an account-based fare collection system. It's a mechanism that really most trans agencies are really moving towards. Even the smallest agencies are starting to really look at it. And it primarily, in the past, I would have my own fare card and I would tap it. But if I lost it, well, I lost all my money with it. But now with an account-based, that money would be traveling with me throughout the network. And some of the extra incentives to that is not only is it now a card that we can better monitor and better protect, but, and it's more predictable for a lot of riders, is that the biggest feature to this is the ability to earn as you go. So we have a lot of riders who may not be able to pay a day pass up front, let alone a monthly fare. And so we've said, all right, if you rode RIPTA and you continuously paid us up to that amount, we would stop charging you at that threshold, which in our case is $70 a month. And you could ride the remainder of that time period on us, because essentially you've already paid us for it. So you could earn your pass as opposed to before, where you'd literally be paying us trip after trip after trip. And, I will acknowledge, there's a lot of agencies whose fares are a little bit on the lower side than ours when compared to our peers. But again, we're a say-weight operator, so we have a little bit of a unique situation to be working with. But this has really, WAVE has been in development for a number of years. We're now very much in the implementation phase of it. Utilization is still growing day to day. I think it's still going to take a lot more effort to really get it out to all of our riders and really explain the benefits of it. Because when we initially launched it, it was right towards the tail end of COVID. And so a lot of people were still kind of figuring out their commuting patterns, whether they wanted to pick up the card or if they wanted to continue paying in cash. And that was partially part of the study, is we wanted to see utilization trends based on the pilot as well. But WAVE ultimately is part of a larger conversation, and it's not just a conversation we're having, but other agencies around kind of what is the future of mobility and how does kind of centralizing the collection of fares and payment really work across all modes, not just fixed route or flex or paratransit, but other services that are offered across the state of Rhode that may not be offered by RIPTA or may in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you mentioned that RIPTA serves it serves the whole state. You have a wide range of communities that your transit authority is serving. And so I'd be curious to know a little bit more about why RIPTA chose Central Falls for this specific pilot to test this geofencing feature of this overall WAVE technology.
Sure. So Central Falls is Rhode Island's smallest and densest city. It is 1 square mile by 1 square mile. It's home to a little over 22,000 people. It's predominantly a majority minority community, predominantly Hispanic and Latino descended individuals, many people of whom are in greater need of public transit than other parts of the state. They're communities where the median income is a lot lower than in other parts of the state. And so when we were doing the development for the geofencing, we wanted an area that would give us not only a wide net of people to actually be involved in the pilot, right? Have a larger kind of control and a larger participant pool, working with one whole community as opposed to just kind of picking people out of an application process saying, all right, you have 500 here, you have 500 here, and you just watch their behavior. But it also allowed us to see what an actual geofence would look like on a larger scale, larger as in like larger than just say, hey, it's 2 or 3 stops in a 2-block radius. We had an entire community to work with. And it definitely was the right decision on our part because it allowed us to work with a community that we've been working with for a number of years and trying to improve public transit. And using this geofencing really helped us to really identify, are there still shortfalls in the technology that we're providing through WAVE that we need to be better communicating to the public? Is it, what is the messages and the means to get people to utilize WAVE in general, even outside of this pilot? So it gave us a really good group of residents and let alone riders to really watch the behavior. And like I said, Central Falls has been a very great partner to us, and they've been working with us for a number of years to just really improve public transit overall.
That makes a lot of sense. And you just mentioned that Central Falls is one of the main partners on this project. Are there any other partners that are a part of this project that you want to speak on and talk about their roles?
So insofar as the project itself, other than the city, the developer of the fare system itself in it, which is based in Europe, but has grown pretty predominantly here in the US over the last few years. One notable customer that they have is TriMet in Portland. They were actually their first customer, to my understanding. They're the ones who developed the WAVE system for us. They provided us with the hardware for the system. They helped us do all the coding for it. And so without their support, it would have been much harder for us to develop it, just because, again, we're utilizing kind of the source code that they had written. And there was some functionality that we had to work with. And their cooperation with our scheduling software, Rhode, who provides Hastis, is also critical because those systems have to communicate with each other in order for the geofence to work correctly. But their roles were, for those 2 software developers, their role was primarily on the back end for us. They weren't directly involved in the marketing or the day-to-day operation. They primarily helped me in getting us to the point where we were ready to launch.
Gotcha. What community engagement efforts or outreach efforts have you or project partners like the City of Central Falls undertaken to promote this pilot? I know you mentioned that it is a very high density, predominantly like Spanish speaking community. So wondered if you could touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So I think what I would say is when we launched the pilot in March of 2022, we were still kind of in this hazy area with COVID where we weren't exactly sure, like we had gotten out of a major wave, but we weren't sure if another wave was coming in. And so we had to be a little bit more cognizant at the beginning of how we were doing the outreach because there were still restrictions in place. There was still a little control over what was going on. And so, we did a kickoff event with the mayor. We had our CEO with us. But kind of the engagement was really upon RIPTA to kind of be really promoting it in the long term. So at the start, we had, as part of the project, we had put aside about 1,000 WAVE cards on hand because, again, we were still in the process of really deploying the system. So some people were still not necessarily familiar as to where they could get cards or how they could upload cards. So we were helping people, we were distributing cards throughout the city. So we were working with a number of nonprofits in the city, whether it was Paraíso Latino, a number of the churches in the city's public library, the school system. There's a couple of predominant health centers in the city as well, and they were helping to articulate this and kind of tying their missions to the program as well. Like, for example, Neighborhood Health Center, which is run by the Blackstone Valley Health System. They were articulating to people saying, if you took advantage of this program, it would help them make their medical appointments and kind of inspire them to actually get back in the groove of getting better healthcare outside of COVID. Or the public library may have used it as an opportunity to really work with the school system to say, now you have more flexibility to move around. It's an opportunity to really re-engage people in participating in programs that they're organizing or to work with students to be involved. So some of these organizations did it on their own volition, but at the end of the day, for us at RIPTA, as a statewide operator, we were promoting on the basis of saying, we know a lot of the folks that live in Central Falls work in a lot of the other communities in Greater Providence, whether it's Providence itself or in Warwick or Cranston. If anything, if they utilize the geofence product using the wave cart particularly, we were still giving them kind of a lower cost to making that commute, at least in one direction. This was a one-directional pilot, unless you were in the city itself, it was both ways. So at least it was easing people's costs a little bit. We couldn't, offer a whole fare product specific to it, because otherwise it would have gotten a little bit trickier. And then it would evolve to a total free program that was kind of outside the scope of the geofencing. But the init system did allow us to get a sense of who was using the system. We at least had a general sense of what was going on. And it allowed us to really get a sense of, from an engagement standpoint, what was the actual kind of general populations that were utilizing the product. So like, if we knew how many senior products were being used, we could tell, did we need to focus more energy on groups that were more focused on senior and disabled folks, for example. But I think some of this also had to just come down to word of mouth. We did some paid media as well at the start. We did provide some additional cards about 6 to 8 months in, just because, again, we were kind of reaching a point where we needed to see if we could kind of coax a few more people to participate. But it evolved over time.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like, the overarching theme of this project is we're trying to ease people's travels, and we're trying to figure out ways that we can promote people to get on transit more. So I know that the project launched last March. Are there any, I guess I'm curious about what impacts and outcomes from the project you guys have seen so far. If there's been any significant changes in ridership, because it is kind of taking that fare away in this community.
So let's break this down into two parts. So from the technology side of the project, it's a success. I know the geofencing works. I've checked the number of positive transactions against those that may have not panned out, and 99% of the time it has worked. So in that 1% where it isn't, it may just be due to smaller technical issues. So insofar as the highlight of the program, it's a success. If we're talking about it from the kind of the secondary benefit of saying, all right, we're going to offer free transit for all the riders in the city because we have the geofence, I think that is a little bit trickier to answer. One reason I say that is kind of about 6 months into the pilot, we had to make some temporary service reductions. So that had a little bit of an impact on ridership. And, for the longest time, even during COVID, RIPTA did not have to reduce any service at all. We're one of the very few. So when that 6 month, 7 month period came in, some of the routes in Central Falls had little choice, but we had to reduce service in those areas to ensure that every part of the state still retains some level of decent service. And so, for example, the route that had the most ridership, and still had the most ridership even after the reductions, was Route 72, which connects Pawtucket, Central Falls with the western side of Providence before it comes to downtown. That was easily getting nearly 35 to 3,700, between 35 to 3,700 trips a month. And for a duration of time, the number of trips actually had gone down. And that was, again, reflective of the service reduction, not because of the program. And we're still working our way into restoring those. But, our story of having to make service reductions is not unique to us. Every transit agency across the country is experiencing it. It's just as unfortunate it occurred during the pilot, and we couldn't plan for that. But, on an overarching basis, I would say, we definitely had a pretty consistent ridership between 700 to 800 unique individuals utilizing Wave. We did use our APC system to kind of look at not just the init transactions themselves, but just overarching ridership at all these stops in the city. So for those who are paying cash, we could at least see what the differential was. At a high level, because I looked at the most recent data just before I joined you, the last 3 months, there was still pretty much a 50-50 split where there were still a lot of people paying with cash, but there were still people paying with the card and getting that free trip. And I think a lot of that still just comes down to overarching education and of just Wave in general and getting people to understand the benefits of that product. That is something that goes outside of the geofencing insofar as the technology is concerned. But whenever you implement a new fare system, you're not going to have 100% utilization, from the get-go. And I think if anything, it gives us kind of a message with this pilot that there are still pieces of the education for this system that we still need to work really hard on. And that involves, where do you get a card? How do you upload money to that card? And this would have happened even outside of the pilot. But I think having this control group, the pilot, I could actually see what's going on. So I think it was helpful to us in the longer context of how we communicate to the public about Wave, but it also gives us information to how we work with this geofencing down the road. For the examples I kind of listened to earlier, how we communicate that to those stakeholders and say, all right, if we're going to do this, how can we collectively work together to really make it a success? But I would say overall, no matter what, the program was a success. I think it's just depending, if we're talking about this in the context of ridership, rider behavior is rider behavior, and RIPTA has done a lot to try and encourage that change. But, there are some factors in there that we can't control.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, with pilot projects, it's pretty common to have to adapt and pivot. So it sounds like it's been going relatively well. And either way, there are a lot of lessons learned that have come out of it. I know recently you all announced that there will be an extension of this pilot, and it will be expanding to include the Pawtucket Central Falls Transit Center. And I'm just curious on what prompted that expansion, and then if there are any other plans for the service moving forward.
Sure. So the transit center itself opened back this past January, just a couple months ago. And it's been a project long in the works between RIPTA and Rhode and both the cities of Central Falls and Pawtucket themselves. It's been a major kind of regional project that has been long desired. And it was opening just as we were reaching kind of the last 3 months of the program, of our AIM program. And I was having conversations with our CEO, with a few others, to say, this is where we are with the program. This is kind of the utilization. This is kind of where our financials look like for what we have in the grant. And would it be a good opportunity to leverage what we have in the remaining balance of this program to not only continue Central Falls for a predetermined amount of time, just to see if the transit center might inspire more people to use it, use transit in general, but help kind of catalyze people to actually consider multimodal trips and say, you know what, if I say I commuted to Boston on the train and I live in Pawtucket or Central Falls, well, you know what? The train ticket is still going to be rather pricey, but if I can get the bus and it will be easier for me to utilize the bus, maybe I'm more willing to consider a multimodal train instead of driving. And so we're leveraging our remaining balance of the money we had put aside to kind of help the free fares to kind of retain that cost. And we thought, for a couple of months, we're going to run it to the beginning of August, and we're going to see, does this really provoke any connectivity between rail and bus and vice versa? And we're obviously going to do the same kind of levels of outreach. We'll do some community outreach once we're ready to go. We'll do some communications with the mayors of both Pawtucket and Central Falls to encourage people about it. And Rhode is also doing some promotional outreach because they're kind of our sister agency that's responsible for work with the MBTA and the train station in general. So I'm not sure what the outcome of the expansion is, but I think in the name of trying to inspire people to leverage the assets that we've put in, whether it's RIPTA's bus network or the train station, or really allowing better connectivity within RIPTA's network, particularly for those in Central Falls, to access another free program that we're operating with state support, but not connected to AIM. Our busiest and most frequent bus route is currently free to the end of August. And so if anything, it just kind of helps them have a little bit more ease and see if that encourages more, I guess, transfers just across the network in general. But we'll have a better idea towards the end of the summer as to how that's panned out.
Well, Zach, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights on this project. And I'm really excited to see how it informs future fair policy and programs at RIPTA. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I think the only other thing I would add is, RIPTA originally applied for AIM for this demonstration. And once we did that, then we got a number of other people asking us to do kind of additional kind of free transit or kind of free transit related demonstrations at the same time as this. And so we're in conversations, I'm having conversations with my director and a few others over here to write a wider kind of findings report across all the demonstrations we've been doing, just to kind of give people a full spectrum of not only what has panned out here, but what's panned out in the R-Line demonstration we've done, the Newport hop on, hop off that we did last summer, and a couple of other smaller things that we've been working on, just to kind of give everyone kind of a full spectrum of what the conversation around free transit overall is in the context of RIPTA, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. And so all I will say is just keep an eye out. We'll be having that report hopefully later this year, and we can definitely talk more at that time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And it's been really great being able to talk to you. So thank you.
No problem.